Hello again, friends. This is Mike. Welcome again to the Soul Unleashed podcast. Today we're going to talk about something that I attended last week out in Utah, Salt Lake City. It was actually a genealogical conference, but I want to explain to you how it got me thinking along soul purpose and soul reasons, and that's what we'll discuss today. Stand by. Hello again, friends and fellow truth seekers. Mike Nicholas here with another episode of the Soul Unleashed podcast, where my goal is to help you with questions you might have regarding the awakening of your soul, and particularly to help other left brain types, like I'm convinced I am, ask the right questions in our search for deeper meaning to life. Ultimately, I want to help you unleash your soul from limiting beliefs and smothering paradigms. Let's get started. So sometimes in life, well, a lot of times in life, we ask why we're here, right? And I've asked this question a number of times throughout this podcast. Is one of our burning desires is to know, what's my purpose? Why am I here? Well, I attended something last week in Salt Lake City called RootsTech. It's a genealogical conference. Cleverly enough, this year was called RootsTech 2024. And it bills itself as the largest genealogical conference in the world. It lived up to that billing. There was probably 20,000 people there. It was amazing. Over 250 classes, courses, a large display floor. And I really had a great time. And I'm doing something on the genealogical side that was the reason I went out there. But when I was attending the opening session, I find there's a lot of parallels between genealogy and working with my family and wanting to know my family tree and who my parents were and where they came from. I find there's a lot of similarities or parallels between that quest and the whole Soul Unleashed concept. So I was attending the opening session. It was a huge deal, thousands of people. I don't know how many. It was in this large room and all these large screens behind the speaker. The speaker was a gentleman named Steve Rockwood, and Steve Rockwood is the president and CEO of Family Search. Family Search is an organization. It's run by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or Mormons. And there's a reason why this thing was held in Salt Lake City, because Salt Lake City is kind of the mecca for genealogy. There's a reason within the Mormon Church that they do this, and that's kind of a subject for a different podcast. But there's a reason why Mormons lead the way in terms of genealogy, and Family Search is one of it's an amazing organization. But Steve was talking about how he was growing up and how important family was to him. And behind him was this large screen, and it said, "Remember who you are." And that was kind of the theme of his talk, was remember who you are. And the way he was telling it was, when he was leaving home as a young boy, his father would say to him, "Now remember who you are," and which I think is great advice, and I wish that I'd said it more to my children. But the obvious intent of that is remember whose name you carry, remember who you represent. If you embarrass yourself, you embarrass us. If you do something wrong, same thing. If you do something right, you contribute to us. So that guidance, remember who you are, Steve meant in terms of genealogy. But what got me thinking was all that I've been reading for a number of years, since our son passed, has been in terms of our soul and remembering who we are. Now, there's obviously nothing wrong, and I certainly believe in doing all this family research and knowing who my parents and grandparents were and where we came from and what countries, and it's all super interesting, and I'm hooked on it, okay? I love that part. But there's more to remembering who we are than knowing our family tree. In our line of work, meaning those of you who are listening to me and are on the soul awareness journey, there's more to it. And the more to it is described. I'm going to recommend two books today. Many of you know these books. The first is a book by Dr. Wayne Dyer called Wishes Fulfilled. And for those of you that have not read this, Wayne Dyer's last name is Dyer. He's passed now, but his book is certainly a classic. And the other book I want to talk about is by a gentleman named Mike Dooley. And Mike Dooley is still with us, still very much alive and vibrant. And I've attended a number of his classes and courses and seminars. And he's written a number of books, just like Dr. Dyer has. But the one I want to talk about today is called Infinite Possibilities, The Art of Living Your Dreams by Mike Dooley, Dooley. Both these gentlemen talk about there being something that we need to discover, which is beyond our normal, everyday, ordinary selves. The self that gets up in the morning, makes breakfast, gets the kids to school, goes to work, comes back home, pay your taxes, go on a vacation maybe once a year, grow old, enjoy your grandchildren, and die. There's nothing wrong with that, and he makes that clear in his book, Dr. Dyer does. But he says there's more to it. There's more than what we should be doing. And he talks about what is the purpose of our soul. The same question that I mentioned at the beginning. We all want to know why we're here, what we're supposed to be doing. I just want to quote for just a little bit from the book. I don't like quoting books on podcasts because it's hard to stay focused on this. But he says, the ideal of your soul, the thing that it yearns for, is not more knowledge. It's not interested in comparison, nor winning, nor more light, nor ownership, nor even happiness. The ideal of your soul is space, expansion, and immensity. And the one thing it needs more than anything else is to be free to expand, to reach out and embrace the infinite. Why? Because your soul is infinity itself. It has no restrictions or limitations. It resists being fenced in. And when you attempt to contain it with rules and obligations, it is miserable. And I love that description of why we're here, what our soul is supposed to be doing, reaching out, expanding. He goes on later in the book to describe that as doing that through love, and that love is the key and the important part of all that. He talks about also there being two selves. There's the inner self concept and the outer self concept. Now, the inner self concept is what I already kind of described to you. That's what we all do right now. We get up, we grow up, we have a certain picture of ourselves. We're prone to colds. We're vegans, or we're not vegan, or we like meat, or we're smart, or we're not smart, or we do math well, or we're good readers, or whatever. Those are all physical attributes that we ascribe to ourselves, and it's our intellect, our talents, and our physical body traits, that our personality traits that we describe, and that is our outer self concept. Our inner self concept is much, much different and much harder to know. And when we're talking about remember who you are, this is the way Dr. Dyer is interpreting it, is our inner self concept. It's pretty difficult to achieve. Many people go throughout life without even thinking about this, and that's fine. But there are many of us, and if you're listening to this podcast, that may apply to you, where we want to know more about why we're here and what we're supposed to be doing. So this specific inner self concept is just tied into an invisible power, that we're part of an invisible overall soul. We're all one. As part of the ending of the RootsTech conference, the third day, the person that every day they had a celebrity come in. The first day it was Henry Cho. The last day it was Kristen Chenoweth. And, I know Kristen Chenoweth is a famous singer. She did Wicked, and I've seen her sing many times, and I really love and respect her for her talent. But I did not know some of the things that she shared on the stage. She is an adopted child, and she went and eventually found her birth mother, and she talked about that as part of an interview process. The MC for the event, he did a great job. It wasn't Steve; it was another gentleman. But he talked to Kristen Chenoweth, and then she sang, and then talked again, sang some more. But in between the songs, she was talking about how she has two families and how she's thankful to God every day that she has both families. And she maintained a very deep and personal relationship with both her birth mother and the family she grew up with. And she's just so grateful that she was adopted by the family she was adopted by. But at the end of her discussion, which is the point of why I brought this up, she said, we're all brothers and sisters. We're all related. Now, she was, I think, talking at a level higher than genealogy when she said that. I believe that Ms. Chenoweth was actually talking about the higher power of our soul. We're all related. We're all part of the same God. And that's a key point that Dr. Dyer makes in his book. We're all part of the one soul, the one universe. Before I jump into Mike Dooley real quick, I did want to mention another gentleman that influenced me early on, and that is Napoleon Hill. Many of you know him as the author of the book Think and Grow Rich, and he's written all kinds of books. Napoleon Hill's time was, the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. He became incredibly wealthy, but it was because he wrote particularly this book, Think and Grow Rich. Now, that book talks about tapping into some higher power, higher consciousness. At the time, he didn't know how to describe it. He just described it as something that you tie into that is an important key ingredient to your success. And if you have a burning desire married with an understanding and acceptance of this higher power, then you can't be stopped. You can accomplish anything. In fact, in his book, Wishes Fulfilled, Dr. Dyer refers to Napoleon Hill and mentions that exact thing. So I've talked about Napoleon Hill before in this podcast, but I just wanted to mention that he also comes to mind when I think about Steve Rockwood saying, remember who you are. Mike Dooley, for his part, and his book is called Infinite Possibilities, and he talks about also understanding who you are. His main tagline that he uses all the time is thoughts become things, that we can actually cause things to happen because we believe in them. And that concept, many of you are familiar with, is called manifestation. So the way he expresses it is when it comes to thoughts about other people, we can miraculously attract those who possess similar thoughts and complementary dreams, partners in love or business or clients or customers. And so they are attracted to us because we're on the same wavelength and thinking about them. But for his part, what Mike Dooley refers to is we're all part of one soul. Everything is God. Everything. Now, obviously, we can think of each other as being part of God. You, me, your cousin, your neighbor across the street, but also the rocks and the trees and the blades of grass and the chair you sit on. Everything is part of God. Everything comes from God. Everything is made of the same stuff that God has provided. So we're all part of God. And it kind of reminds me of that line from Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. I'm not the God, I'm a God. And I'm not even saying we're a God. What I'm saying is we are part of the God. And in a lot of religions, that's considered a heresy, even think that. I had a lot of trouble understanding and believing that when I first started reading all these books a few years ago because it conflicted with what I was raised with as a Catholic. But one interesting thing that Mike Dooley says is many people see life as either black or white. And that binary piece, which is where I was, that binary piece causes some people to assume that if there's a God, then there must also be something that is the opposite of God. And for many of us, that's the devil, right? We have created this power, this force, devil, to be the opposite of God. Mike's point is that there cannot be anything that is not God. God is everything. And so that's an interesting conundrum to think about, right? The devil, man, I've done podcasts just about the devil and hell, right? Does that exist? Does hell exist? I can tell you, since we're on this little tangent, that no one that I've interviewed, no one who has been a medium or any type of psychic person, no one has ever described hell. The people that they've talked to or the people that have come through, no one has described something that we understand as hell, a permanent exile to some place that is fire and brimstone. Now, people have come through that have described going through life changes or life reviews after they die, and those are uncomfortable, but they're temporary, and your soul goes through a period of healing. And there are people who have described to me negative energy or low energy that they try to avoid. But again, no one has described anything that is not God. And I think that's really interesting and important. So those are the two books I recommend you read by Mike Dooley and Wayne Dwyer. And I just want to bring it back around to the concept of remember who you are. Remembering who you are in terms of genealogy is wonderful and important and helpful and interesting. And you do wonderful things for your family when you help them remember who they are from the genealogical perspective. But you also do wonderful things for yourself and by extension, your loved ones, when you remember who you are in terms of your soul and the bigger picture, the infinite power that you can tap into, that is who you are, who your soul is, and your outer self, if you will, according to Dr. Dyer. And that's what's important to me. So thank you for this little reminiscing about RootsTech 2024. I hope to go to RootsTech 2025. I think genealogy is awesome, but what's more awesome to me is helping share with people an understanding or an appreciation for our larger self, our bigger self, and what our soul can do. That's all for this week. Thank you again, and I will be back later either this week or early next week. Right now, my pace podcast-wise is about once a week, and that's due to some things which are just going on right now. But I appreciate you listening. Also, love it when you respond, send me a message or comment on any of my podcasts, and talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.